Guys, welcome to Airsoft Tech Talk, episode 5. Now today I have a special guest with me. This is one of my old friends from way back when I first started teching. Him and I actually started teching at about the same time, and it's kind of cool because we both have the same name. So if you want to tell the audience about yourself and let them get to know you if they don't already.
Alright, hey guys, my name is Ryan, but I'm known online through forums or Instagram, YouTube as Legacy Airsoft. I've been teching since about 2011, and I actually met Ryan, or the Airsoft Tech, a long time ago. We were both kind of beginners around the same time, kind of learning the ropes, and we kind of rose up at the same time, so it's nice to come back with him now.
Indeed. Yeah, as he said, he started teching around 2011, and that's about when I started teching. We both got about 4 to 5 years of experience on our belt, so we both are pretty confident in our abilities, let's just say. But without further ado, he is here to help answer some questions. He is going to answer 3 questions. He picked out 3 that he liked. He's going to answer those 3, and I picked out 3 that I liked, and I'm going to answer those 3. So without further ado, let's get down to the questions. All right, so with the first question, I'm going to let Ryan take it on this one.
Alright, so the first question from Matt Legler, or Legler, sorry if I butchered that name, but in an SSG setup that is pretty high stress, what is a recommended battery? I run an 11.1 volt, 15 to 25 C, and I've heard people saying it's too small. What are your thoughts?
Good question.
So, thank you. Right away, I can tell that you are, I'm assuming you're referring to small, not as in the physical size of it, but maybe you are, but really as in, like, it's not providing enough power, because you mentioned how you, like, hypothetically were in a high-stress setup. So I want to address that. What a lot of people don't know is that the amp hours of a battery or the milliamps of a battery, they're commonly referred to as, like, the capacity, like, how long the battery lasts. It relates to how big the battery is, and that's true. But it also actually plays a role in the power output of the battery. And the way that works is that your C rating, or your C dump rating, and your milliamp rating are 2 components that make up the power output of a battery. So if you have, for example, a 1,200 milliamp battery, that battery is 1.2 amps. Then times that by your constant C rate of the battery, and that gives you the power output. So just, it's like math and physics. So then if you have a battery with more milliamps, the power output goes up. If you have a battery with more C rating, the power output also goes up. So right off the bat, do I think your battery's too small? I mean, it could be. It depends how much amps your motor is pulling to the setup. So the way you calculate this is the more stressful your setup, and this also has to do with your motor. So if you have a low TPA motor on a high-stress setup, it's going to pull a lot of amps to power that motor. If you have a high TPA or a high-torque motor on a stressful setup, it's going to still pull a lot, but it will need a lot less because it's a higher torque motor. Now, the amps the motor needs to pull, the battery has to give those amps off. And you determine the amps the battery gives off by C rating times milliamps over 1,000, or just regular amps if you didn't need that explanation. But, so that's what I wanted just to point out, is that if you're running like a thin buffer tube LiPo, the milliamps in that LiPo do actually play a role in how much power the LiPo gives to your gun. So I think that's what you were asking about the size of the LiPo, and I'll let Ryan take it from there.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't know much about because it's on the incredibly technical side of Airsoft. Now, that in itself isn't incredibly technical. It's a very basic concept that, a tech, especially if you're going to be a tech for hire, needs to grasp. And like I said, it's not complicated, but for the average airsofter, they take a look at it like, oh, it's kind of mind-boggling at first. You kind of take it all in at once, and you're just kind of like, whoa. Got to go back and reread that a couple times. And that's kind of how I was when I first read up into it, a couple years back. But, once you get the basics of it, it's pretty basic physics and math. That's why you see a lot of, techs with their DSGs, like 60 RPS DSGs. They run a huge battery. Personally, I run a 4500 mAh, 65 to 75 C, I think, 11.1 volt LiPo battery on my DSG. And the reason why I do that is because Like he said, I have a high discharge capability and a high capacity. So with this, I have more power I can give to the motor to actually feed it the necessary amount of energy it needs to rotate the gearbox efficiently. So if you're actually running a really low voltage 11.1 volt for the setup, let's say like 11.1 volt, 15C to 25C or whatever, and it's like a buffer tube LiPo, and the DSG at its most optimum setup for 11.1 volt can get like 60 RPS. However, with this battery, you're only going to get like 50, 55 RPS, 55 RPS on a full charge, and it's just because you don't have enough energy to feed that motor to get it rotating the gearbox properly. And so what this does is it actually destroy your battery more quickly than if you were to run it on a proper setup, I guess you could say. And it'll also destroy your motor. If your motor isn't getting the energy it needs, it starves, just like a person. If you're not getting the food you need, you're going to starve. So that's how the motor works. If it doesn't get enough energy, it'll starve, and it'll hurt the battery too. And so that's basically my input with that. But Ryan covered the biggest parts of it. Legacy is his forum name, so I get those confused all the time. All right, but one question out of the way, move on to the next. All right, so now time for my question and answer. Okay, so Leopard Airsoft asks, what's the difference between 8mm and 9mm bushings, and what are bushings even for? Okay, so I'll actually start with the last part of that question. You want to understand what bushings are before you move on to size and stuff. So bushings, what they are is they're kind of like a cushion or a raceway for the gear axles to rotate on. Without bushings, your gears would wear out the gearbox shell so quickly that you'd have to replace your gearbox shell probably once a week. That being said, bushings are a very necessary part to gearbox operations. So you can actually get bushings or bearings, but since the question specifically asks about bushings, I'm going to stick with bushings. Now, the first part of your question, asking what's the difference between 8mm and 9mm bushings, is simply size. That is all. 8mm bushings are smaller than 9mm bushings. Now, a lot of people think that since 8mm bushings are smaller, they're weaker and can therefore handle less stress than 9mm bushings. To an extent, you are technically correct. However, the difference is so negligible that 8mm bushings can do the exact same thing 9mm bushings can do. An M190 SSG can run on 8mm bushings just as well as it can run on 9mm bushings. It really does not matter. And that's a big thing with the airsoft community, and they think that 6mm bushings are worse than 7 or 8mm bushings just because they're smaller. And while 6mm bushings may not be preferred, they can work just fine. And I ran an M190 DSG on a 6mm gearbox before, and it ran just fine until the shell actually cracked, and the bushings were just fine. So that being said, 8mm, 9mm doesn't make a difference, with bushings that is. However, with bearings, you're looking at a different story. Bearings you do want to get as big as possible. Some people say that 8mm bearings are the best because modified ceramics are really good and Magic Box bearings are pretty good. However, there are some 9mm bearings that are pretty good as well. King Arms makes a pretty good set, and KWA bearings can be good if they're not so, on the lemon side sometimes. But that's my point of view on it. I'll let Ryan have his.
Yeah, not much to add on that because, again, it's more of like a factual answer. However, to clarify, is the diameter of the bushing itself. So, like 6mm bushings have 6mm diameter because they're circles, and so on. And if you got like P90s, I think they have one bushing that's more of an oval. The bushings are measured based on the other two circular ones, and they'll usually do the label and book tag, for example, when you buy them. And the main difference between size, like Ryan said, I can testify that the size is not really strength. Just like a lot of things in airsoft, it's more of the manufacturer and the quality control and the materials used rather than the actual size of the bushing that creates the strength and the durability of the product. The size really just is, if you're planning to build some super high-end gearbox in, I know G&P gearboxes, Lonex gearboxes, VFC shells, they all use 8mm bushings or bearings, for example. So the size is more of a compatibility issue rather than actual. You don't buy a higher sized bushing hole gearbox for more strength. You would buy, if you wanted to use Magic Box bearings or modify ceramic bearings in a build, you would make sure that you bought an 8mm gearbox because they only come in 8mm. It's more for those reasons rather than strength and durability.
Exactly. some techs won't buy a gearbox that isn't 8 millimeter, bearings or bushings because they want the ability to use GMP bearings, nice bearings out there. So it's more of just like Ryan said, just kind of a compatibility thing, not necessarily a durability thing, because materials are much better than the size when it comes down to bushings. All right, so we'll move on to the next question now. On to Ryan's next question. This is a good one.
All right. So, Callsign Orbit asked, explain Joule Creep. This is a question that I get a ton, and I'm sure Ryan also gets this a ton, and I'm answering this almost every day because for some reason it's become extremely popular to talk about Joule Creep all of a sudden, so everyone wants to know what it is. And some people, when they talk about it, they explain it wrong, so other people, it's just good to get it out there. It's a really common question now. So Joule Creep is, well, basically it's physics is what it is, but in Airsoft, one example of Joule Creep would be if I chrono my gun with 0.2 gram BBs and I'm shooting 1.5 joules, and then I go out to the field and I use 0.4 gram BBs in my gun, and when I re-chrono, I'm actually shooting 1.75 joules. Joule Creep is made up of a lot of different factors, but the biggest factor is air volume. So if I were to build a gun and I wanted to make it a Joule creeping build, or a gun that has Joule Creep, I would over volume the gun. And voluming is the volume of air that can fit in your cylinder, and that is decreased by port sizes or adding AOE. I won't really get into that because you can research that plenty of places online. But it's the volume of air that is in your cylinder compared to the volume of air that can fill your barrel. And then if you are using heavier BBs, the heavier the BB, the more air is required to push it out the barrel. So let's say you want a 1.7 to 1 or a 2 to 1 ratio of air in your cylinder to air in your barrel in order to get like an optimal, properly volume setup that will give you like the correct FPS and the same joules across the board. If you were to Joule Creep that, you would up the ratio. You would have more air in your cylinder, or you would just make a shorter barrel to increase the ratio of air in your cylinder to air in your barrel. So what this effectively does is you have enough air to properly volume a 0.4 gram BB, but then you go down and use a 0.2 gram BB. So a lot of the air isn't being used, and then when you go up BB weights, more and more of that air is being used, so you're getting more energy out of the shot. And in a sense, that's Joule Creep. There is more to it, but that's the simpler way I can think of explaining it. Hopefully Ryan has something he can say on it.
Yeah, pretty much the problem with having two people talk about these things is that we're just repeating each other. Airsoft teching stuff is pretty much a matter of fact. Hardly anything is a matter of opinion. And so, everything's right there. And like you said, there are more variables to Joule creeping. You can, if you can slow down that BB physically by applying more hop up, then you can get more FPS out of it. That is a thing you can run in Joule creep setups. If you can somehow run a gun on full hop up with like a 0.43 gram BB on like a 50 millimeter barrel, just for a crazy example, on an M170 spring full stroke, you're gonna get some crazy Joule creep. But you also have problems, and there are actually problems with Joule creep. If you're running an extreme Joule creep build, you can have a deficiency of accuracy. That is, if you don't stabilize barrels and do everything you can to utilize air like in the cylinder and to prevent vibrations from just destroying your accuracy. Because with all this air, it's got to go somewhere, and it's going to shake that barrel to pieces. And so if you don't stabilize it, you're going to get rounds going everywhere. But it's, to a point, it's kind of negligible. But if you're using 0.20 gram BBs on a really heavy over volume setup, you're going to get some really bad accuracy. But that's really all there is to Joule Creep, and it does create a cool sound because it kind of creates a loud pop sound.
Yeah, if you've ever heard someone do the popping sound, it's usually an over volume setup or like a Joule Creep setup, but using the lightweight BB, so there's a lot of extra air after the BB leaves, combined with an amplifier. And you can do some other stuff in your gearbox, like remove sorbo and remove padding and stuff, but that's usually the loud popping CQB guns you hear all the time.
Yeah, I ran my P90 like that for the longest time, had an amplifier on it. I corrected AOE off the piston and the piston head instead of having it on the cylinder head. So I had all this weight on my piston, really short barrel, heavy duty spring, and a really big amplifier. So it was just making really crazy pop sounds. But Yeah, that's essentially Joule Creep for you. There, like Ryan said, there's some research you're gonna have to do, but that's pretty much the gist of it right there. All right, so my next question. This is from Manny262626. His first part says, "I second the high speed SSG versus normal speed at DSG." That wasn't actually asked. It was somebody asking about a low speed DSG versus a high speed DSG. However, I'll answer your question about high speed SSG versus versus normal speed DSG, quote unquote normal speed DSG. And then you ask how to get better range out of a high speed build with a super stubby barrel. We already talked about that. So barrel stabilization, very finely. A good finish on a barrel, basically. You want something nice, like a good barrel, good finish, good aligned hop-up bucking, just everything as perfect as it can get. We pretty much already touched on that. And then you ask, what are the best gears/gear ratio company-wise, and not Riot's, that work with Riot DSG gears? Okay, so the first question you have, high-speed SSG versus normal speed DSG. Let's put out two theoretical guns for a second. You have a 40 RPS SSG versus a 40 RPS DSG. Now, if you ask me which one's going to be more reliable, it's kind of up in the air a little bit. There are pluses and minuses to both. Personally, I prefer the DSG. DSGs are a little bit more efficient than high-speed SSGs, but they're both kind of on the unreliable side as far as general use goes. With a high-speed SSG, you got to think of how it works here. You're rotating the entire gearbox. You're cycling the entire gearbox, the bevel, spur, sector, gear, 40 times in 1 second. So you're making 40 revolutions in 1 second, and that puts a lot of stress on the bevel gear. And a lot of ACM companies like SHS and Lonex cannot make a bevel worth anything. So if you're going to buy something like that, then you're going to kind of be gambling as far as the bevel gear is concerned. In addition, you have the chance of running into PME issues. High-speed SSGs are kind of prone to that kind of failure. Yes, it can happen in DSG setups, but it's very difficult to do that. As far as trigger response goes, DSG kind of wins over there, and everything else is pretty even. With high-speed SSG, you do have the ability to run Joule Creep more easily than you could, DSG. But the good things about DSG is when you're cycling the entire gearbox, you're only cycling it, say if you've got 40 RPS DSG, you're only cycling it 20 times actually, so the bevel gear is only rotating 20 times. This is more efficient on the stress of the gears, and it just relieves stuff much more easily. Now the piston can suffer a little bit of stress over the SSG setup because in a DSG setup you have to have a stronger spring to compensate for the lack of how much short stroke you have. So on the pickup tooth you have an M170 spring, and sometimes the pickup teeth can break, especially SHS pistons. They're just prone to failure sometimes. So that's an inherent flaw to the DSG concept. Another one would be you can sometimes run through DSG tappet plate springs because you sometimes have to stretch them or cut coils off to get it to feed. So that can be a problem there, but that's a pretty small one really. Those don't break a whole lot. I think in my DSG I only had 2 break in the course of a year, and I had good use out of it. And some people have, worse experience, people have better experience. That's just my experience. But yeah, those are the pros and cons of high-speed SSG versus DSG. Now, another one would be FPS. If you want to get really high FPS with a DSG, say around like 400, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than a high-speed SSG. But you get better trigger response with the DSG, better efficiency, all kinds of other cool stuff comes with the DSG. So, in a sense, I prefer DSG because it just comes with more that I can do with it. But high-speed SSGs are certainly easier than high-speed DSGs. If you're building a gun for the first time, definitely go high-speed SSG over DSG. You will not have a good time if you're going DSG your first try. And then the next question, this is a quick answer. What is the best gear/gear ratio company-wise that work with DSG gears? The best company, in my opinion, is G&G. G&G on their Pro line guns, their heat-treated gears, are incredibly nice. I actually really love their gears because I've never broken them, number one. Number two, they sound beautiful. Number three, they mesh flawlessly with Riot's DSG. And they're just fantastic. I love them so much. The bevel gear teeth are super strong. The spur gear, though thin, is strong and meshes very well with the DSG gear. That's my answer to it. If Ryan wants to have an input, he can.
Yeah, no, I'm actually laughing to myself a little bit because while you were reading the question off, I made a little plan of what I wanted to say, and quite literally, you said every single thing that I was gonna say.
Swag.
But yeah, it was just kind of scary. Like, not even kidding, you hit every single mark and every single little thing I wanted to point out, you pointed out. So just to reiterate, um, if you have a 40 RPS SSG and a 40 RPS DSG, the main things that just kind of like obviously have to stand out for those to be the same spec is that the DSG's motor is going to be under a lot less stress. Namely because to have a 40 RPS DSG, you will be having a higher torque motor than in a 40 RPS SSG by definition. But also because the motor's only spinning the gears at 20 revolutions per minute per second, as opposed to the 40 of the SSG build. Even though it's a higher rated spring, it's only being pulled back half the way at a -8 short stroke or -7 if you have a 9-tooth DSG. And the higher torque motors will be able to handle it much more efficiently than the SSG setup. The reverse of that is that because it's a higher rated spring in the SSG setup, it's much, much, much easier to wear down your pistons. And like Ryan already pointed out, specifically that I'll talk about the SHS blue pistons or the Dream Army purple pistons, which are the same thing, because they're the most common low-budget, strong piston people usually buy, and they break. They have quality control issues being an SHS product. They break a lot in the rear near the pickup tooth. The support is really bad. I have done that myself with my DSG, actually, so I can attest to that. It's a quality control issue that won't be fixed. It's the cheap budget piston. It's not more expensive high-end piston. And yeah, I don't want to keep going on because I have more to say, but like I said, Ryan already said almost every single point I was going to make.
Pretty much reading each other's minds. What he said with the SHS piston is, you're literally playing the Airsoft China, made lottery, and people call it ACM lottery. You're pretty much putting a round in the chamber, spinning it, and putting it at your foot and seeing if you're going to get lucky. That's pretty much what it is. If you get lucky, then, hey, your SHS piston is probably going to live through hell and back. But if you're not lucky, it's probably going to break at the first trigger pull. So there's just issues with ACM stuff in general. But yeah, that's pretty much the answer to that question. We both gave our inputs on that, and yet again, we pretty much read each other's minds. Okay, Ryan's turn.
All right, next question by 6mm Tech. It's like a 3-part question, and I think the previous question we answered was actually in response to this question, so maybe it'll make more sense after.
My bad, Manny.
Best stock gun to upgrade on a budget is the first question. Best gun to run stock. And then high speed SSG versus normal speed DSG. So obviously we just touched on that. I will add one more thing though, because I did think of it after. Back to the gear meshing, to the previous question. I agree with Ryan. The G&G Proline gears, I have used them before. I actually really like them. I do not like the combat machine gears, but the Proline ones are actually very nice. And the SHS gears, I don't like them because with the bevel specifically, it's like playing the lottery, like we just explained. It's either going to strip on you or it's going to work. And however, they do mesh very well with all of Riot's Gen 1 and Gen 2 gears. I haven't tested them with the Gen 3 gears, but I would assume they mesh the same with the Sector at least. Now back to this current, because this question did involve the DSG, SSG, but we'll go back to the main part of it. Best stock gun to upgrade on a budget. So many people have different opinions on this. I'm going to take this as an internals only question, meaning that I am not going to factor in the externals of the gun because the question is specifically best one to upgrade on a budget. And the key word for me there is budget. So my answer to this question is going to be a JG. And the reason for that question, I have a whole write-up about it on the forum comparing their internals to other ones of the same price. But having been in so many cheaper end ACM guns and gearboxes, JG consistently had the most durable parts. Now, the problem with JG guns is the parts don't come tuned very well. So when you're using a stock JG and it breaks, 9 times out of 10, except for their their new carrot pistons. They're crap. But other than that, 9 times out of 10, the failure was actually due to the quality control and the tuning of the parts. For example, AOE, shim, grease, basic stuff that you would pay a tech to do. From the factory, JG guns don't come put together very well, but the parts used are very strong and very durable. I still use a JG's nylon cylinder head in my DSG. I ran JG XYT gears in 2 DSGs now, and they're being recycled to a 3rd soon. JG's old cream piston I ran in my Scar, which is an old build I had a long time ago, for almost 2 years before it finally gave out as a stock nylon piston. JG piston heads I've run through DSG builds before. JG cylinders are the brass one. They're normal brass cylinders. You polish it and it's fine. Their tappet plates are nylon and they're very, very durable. I haven't had one break or bend or deform yet to cause issues. Their spring guides are non-bearing, but they are metal, which is a huge plus over most guns at that price range. The gearbox shells, they're annoying to shim because they're tight, but if you can get over that one factor, they're very durable. Miscellaneous parts, I mean, contacts, I have no complaints. They're just standard. Wiring isn't the best, but it's better than some at the same price range. Small parts and springs are all the same really throughout guns. They're not necessarily better or worse. The only downfall to the JG, in my personal opinion, is that it uses a 2-piece hop-up system, which it's still not bad. It's just once you go to upgrade your hop-up at all, you're going to have to take your Dremel or file and clean out an area to upgrade to a 1-piece hop-up. If Ryan has anything to say on that.
See, like, I almost want to disagree with him just so we can get a disagreement going. But JG is just JG in general is a really good company, uses an upgrade platform. They just have great parts. And like he said, if your JG does break down by some chance, 9 times out of 10, it's due to the tuning, not the parts. Tuning matters, of course the part quality matters, but if tuning sucks, it doesn't matter what you're running. If you're running riots and retro arms, everything, it's still going to break down because you have terrible tuning. But, JG stuff like their gears and especially their motor, if you can get the JG Blue, the Neo motor, it pretty much makes every gun you put it up against obsolete because the JG 22 TPA Blue motor is just a fantastic motor. It's a beautiful motor, and it's one of the more expensive parts in the gun. So if you're upgrading, you don't have to spend money to get, say, a Lone XA2 or to buy another JG Blue because you already have that $30 or $40 motor right in your gun already. And you just got the gun.
Just to add on that, sorry, Ryan, I'm cutting you off. I'll apologize.
No worries.
Sorry. But as the question was, best stock gun on a budget, that was my reason for JG. It comes with a motor that I still use today. It's my favorite motor. It comes with all these durable parts, so if you're planning to upgrade it, you're going to do the tuning yourself. So as long as you have durable parts, it's just one less thing you need to replace to make the gun last. Because if you're upgrading it and you're buying this as an upgrade gun, I'm going to assume that you're planning to open it up and do all the tuning things yourself.
Indeed. I can't really think of anything to add on. I didn't think of the two, like, as he was, saying these things, I had every single one in my head except the 2-piece hop-up unit. 2-piece hop-up units are really annoying. However, if you're getting into teching and you're buying this gun to work on a budget, that's going to teach you how to work with a Dremel, how to work with a file, how to have the patience that is required to do Airsoft Tech work. So while annoying, it's kind of that necessary evil in getting into teching. Alright, was there a second part of that question?
Yeah. So the next part of that question is best gun to run stock, unupgraded. So I'm going to hate myself for answering this way because I don't like this company's internals at all, but I'm going to have to say KWA. And this is something you probably would never hear me recommend anywhere. I don't like KWA personally. They use they use a lot of proprietary parts that make upgrading and changing even external pieces. Like their lower receivers are proprietary to their gearbox. So if you want to change lower receivers, you can't do that without buying a completely new gearbox and things like that. So KW uses a lot of proprietary parts that make upgrading and changing and replacing parts a pain in the butt. However, if you don't get a lemon, which are unfortunately popping up more often these days. They are, in my experience, they have really high performance out of the box, and they also last a really long time as long as you don't abuse them out of the box. And that's why my vote is going to go with them for this one.
Okay. See, I do not like KWA at all. 95% of techs will downright hate them because
Yeah, that's why I said my opening. I'm going to hate myself
Yeah.
for recommending them.
they're the source of all Airsoft Tech troubles, and they're just so annoying. They're not worth it, in my opinion. But, goodness, it's hard to debate that. KWA, I mean, I've seen some KWA guns last 2 years. My friend has one. He's had it for like 2.5 years, and he's only running on like a 7.4 and an 11.1 volt. He's never run on anything else. And so it's still holding up, and it's getting 350 FPS. Granted, out of the factory, it got 380, but, you know, with 2 years of use, and the only thing that happened wrong with it was it dropped 30 FPS, no problem at all. That can be fixed in a matter of 15 minutes for the most part. As far as like best functioning gun out of the box is just keep stock. Dang it.
I'm gonna add like a stipulation in here. If you can do one thing, which one would you pick?
Like wait.
Just to change it up a little bit so you get like a different answer.
Like a different gun.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I opened up the Crytek, I really love what I saw.
Oh, I forgot about those.
It looked awesome.
I might change my answer.
It looked awesome, but however, I've only heard troubles from them from other techs. I've got a friend who's a tech in Georgia who works at a store, and almost every Crytek they sell comes back. And now I loved what I saw in the Crytek. I loved it, but you know, seeing isn't necessarily believing all the time. So I can see these good bearings, I can see these good gears, this good piston and great motor. However, when it comes back broken 95% of the time, it's hard to give it that, you know, oh, it's a good gun. But goodness, if they didn't have their little stupid flaws, I would say Crytek. But they just got the most features, the most internals already put into it. They got a MOSFET in the gearbox, quick change spring system, awesome parts, like their gears are sick, their motor's awesome for stock, and just parts like that. Their piston's better than most pistons, but I've just heard things going wrong with them recently, so I'm reluctant to say they're a good or even best stock, you know, gun, but it looks the best, and I have the most hope in it because Crytek seems to actually want to improve, and I have my hopes in them.
Yeah, sadly, I don't have any personal experience with Crytek's yet, so I can't really weigh in on how durable they are. I know initially off launch, everyone was raving about how robust the gearbox is and how high performance it is and how long it should last. But the keyword there is should, and where I have no personal experience with them, I can't really attest to them lasting a long time.
Indeed. Us techs work on personal experience. Alright, so that does it for that question. I think we covered all the bases on that one, so we'll move on to the next one now. Alright, so now on to my last question, I think this is. Okay, this was actually on my YouTube channel, and I'm trying to pick equal amounts equal amounts from my YouTube and Instagram, so I can kind of keep it the same and treat both people fairly. Okay, so this one comes in from Devon Dillon. I don't know how to pronounce Dillon, but I probably butchered that. But anyway, he has a quick statement. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite tech channels. Fantastic job. Thank you so much. Second part of that is, what would you say is your absolute favorite proprietary internal design? Now, when I read this, I thought, like, whoa. Normally when people ask proprietary designs, they're like, what is your least favorite? Like, what do you hate about this? How can I get around it? Nothing about what do I like about it. Oh, goodness. My favorite proprietary internal design. I wouldn't count the quick change spring guide or quick change spring system as a proprietary design due to how many companies have picked up on it and how many parts are made for that. That being said, you know, I'm reluctant to call that a proprietary design. However, my favorite proprietary design would probably have to be the APS anti-reversal latch. The way that thing is designed is just flawless. How it's designed, if you don't know, traditional anti-reversal latches are a whole thing themselves. They're like this pole with the latch off of it, and you set that into a small hole in the gearbox, and it catches and rotates on the bevel gear and prevents the whole gearbox from spinning backwards. So the APS thing, what it does is it is like in their gearbox they have like this stave, and it comes up out of the gearbox shell, and the anti-reversal latch is just a latch with a hole on top of it, and you put it on top of that latch, and it stays in so much more easily. Because as a tech, if you're a beginner tech, you will know the anti-reversal latch is the bane of everybody's existence. They hate it so much. People have tried to figure out ways to get around it. I mean, HS5 on YouTube has made this tool to prevent, anti-reversal latches from popping out. They're that annoying. When people just don't see how easy it is to look at the APS design and be like, huh, this is genius. Traditionally, APS sucks. I mean, they're just not that great. But they do have some good ideas, and the anti-reversal latch is probably their best idea ever. I'll let Ryan have it from here.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be cheating, but my favorite proprietary piece, I would probably have to say the PGC Pro-Win gearbox.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Well, if you guys don't know what this is, Google it really quick. If you look at the image, it'll better explain it. But basically, it's a gearbox with all the features in one. They're not really sold anymore. I forget if Cradle makes a similar one. I don't think they do. But basically, it's a split gearbox. So there's an upper portion and a lower portion, similar to an ICS. However, it also has a quick spring change feature, and the hop-up is actually connected to the front of the gearbox. So there is no misfeeding issue or alignment issue through if you, for example, changed your rail system and your outer barrel isn't really aligned properly, or you didn't screw it on correctly and it's a little loose. And in a traditional gun, the hop-up will move with the outer barrel because of how the gun's put together. It's just how it works. And that can create feeding issues with your mag. It can create alignment issues with your air nozzle, and this just kind of eliminates that. So it's a small thing, but it is just one more advantage you get out of an ingenious, I think, gearbox system. The only problem with it is that it's not necessarily compatible with every single receiver out there, and I think that's why they went out of business, is because you couldn't really use it in a wide variety of guns. However, if I had to pick a favorite proprietary part, it would have to be this.
I completely forgot about that one. I've actually got a friend who's working, to death trying to get the Pro-Win gearbox to work in a setup, and he's just been working on it for months, and they're crazy. In all honesty, it's one of the coolest concepts that any company's ever thought of, because it gets rid of, like Ryan said, all of the little problems you can have with gearbox shells. With the Pro-Win design, you've got the hop-up unit physically connected to the gearbox shell, so it eliminates any air seal issues there, for the most part. I mean, you can still induce an air seal issue, but you're going to be working hard to do it. So, I mean, there's just so many little things that are done there that are awesome. However, like you said, they're not compatible with a lot of receivers, and by that he means they don't fit at all. Or when they do fit in, you can't click it to safety or to semi, and it just won't do the dumbest of things. And it's ridiculous. It'd be awesome if it worked great, because those would sell out constantly. Everybody would want them. But like you said, just so many issues with them, but it's so cool at the same time. I really like that one. Yeah.
Got that one out of the way.
I completely forgot about that. All right.
Yeah, on a whim, I was like, oh, I don't really like many proprietary parts. And then just out of nowhere, the Pro-Win gearbox flashed in my hand, oh, wait, I actually do like one.
Dang, that's a good one. All right, so that is our last question. All right, guys, well, that'll have to do for Airsoft Tech Talk, Episode 5. I don't know what I'm going to call this one. Maybe Tale of Two Techs, Two Techs Meet Up Again. I don't know yet. I'll come up with a title later. But, I had a great time here with my friend Ryan. This is the first time we've actually talked in a very, very long time, and it's fantastic to get back to talking about Airsoft, all that stuff. So I'll let Ryan have it, the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, same goes to you. I mean, I know we haven't really talked in a while, and I was glad when you approached me asking to do the video, because it brings back little memories between us. I mean, two techs talking about what we like to do. I'm glad you invited me. Thank you for letting me talk with you on the video. Hopefully we can do this more again in the future. But for you guys out there that might not know me, I commonly go by Legacy Airsoft on forums. I'm a moderator over at Airsoft Society, so if you're on that forum, I'm sure you will or have seen me. My Instagram is Legacy Airsoft MA from Massachusetts, and my YouTube is RyeFish2207, but you can probably search it, find a different way, or you can avoid it. I don't care if you don't like me. Don't watch my stuff.
I subscribed to him a long time ago. He's got more subscribers than me, so I think he's at like 1,100 or something. I've got almost 900 now. But yeah, like
Competition.
what is that?
I said competition.
Competition? Oh, he said it, not me. All right, but like I said, that's gonna have to do it for Airsoft Tech Talk episode 5. If you guys like this little duo we got going here, let me know below. Let us know, and we'll definitely get back on it because I have a lot of fun with this. This is a heck of a lot more fun than the solo version that I do. I've got another tech to input, have input, and correct me if I'm wrong. We can go back and forth. And so, of course, this is a little bit less polished than the previous videos, but this is a lot more fun in my opinion. If you guys like it, tell me below, and we'll certainly do more. But until next time, we will see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.